How to hack the overthinking prison. 3 simple keys for instant freedom. Ever wonder what happens when logic is pushed to its absolute limit and left entirely without emotional guidance? Imagine a man with flawless analytical skills, boasting an IQ in the top 1%. Yet, from a pinnacle of success most could only dream of, he lost it all. His career imploded, his marriage collapsed, and he was driven into total bankruptcy. This isn't science fiction. This is the real-life case of Elliot, a patient who proved a brutal neurological paradox to the scientific community. When you lack an emotional compass, logic doesn't save you. Instead, your mind endlessly analyzes every single angle and calculates every hypothetical risk until it ultimately paralyzes you completely. Most of us view overthinking as just a bad habit, casually telling ourselves, just stop thinking. But if it were that easy, your comfortable bed wouldn't turn into a 3 a.m. courtroom where you're simultaneously the defendant and the judge, meticulously dissecting a casual remark someone made days ago. Through the neurological lens of Elliot's case, let's unmask exactly how your mind is playing tricks on you and arm you with 3 biological keys to break through those mental bars and reclaim your freedom today. To understand why we overthink, we first need to look at how the brain toggles between 2 primary networks. First is the TPN, Task Positive Network. This activates when you're focused on an external, goal-oriented task, like writing a report, playing a sport, or solving a math problem. Second is the DMN, Default Mode Network. This automatically switches on when you stop active tasks and let your mind drift, like daydreaming or rehashing the past. In a balanced mind, the DMN fosters memory integration and creativity. But for chronic overthinkers, the DMN gets stuck in the on position. When you lie down to rest and external stimuli fade, your DMN should power down. Instead, it goes into overdrive, scanning your past for mistakes and simulating future catastrophes. In ancient times, this mechanism kept our ancestors alive from predators. In the modern world, however, the brain hijacks it to magnify social anxieties, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being good enough. You end up trapped in a background process that constantly drains your energy battery. Modern society feeds this toxic loop with something we all crave, the freedom of choice. Psychologist Barry Schwartz famously divides individuals into 2 groups when making decisions. Satisficers, who look for an option that is good enough and meets their baseline criteria, and maximizers, who demand the absolute best, optimal option. Most overthinkers are classic maximizers. Think about spending 45 minutes just scrolling through Netflix or a food delivery app, only to go to bed hungry because you're too exhausted to make a choice. This analysis paralysis occurs because having too many options overwhelms the brain. You become so terrified of making the wrong choice that it triggers infinite analysis instead of action. Even after you finally choose, you look back with regret, mourning the options you left behind. Freedom of choice effectively transforms into an invisible pair of handcuffs. Take a quick 3-second pause right here and ask yourself, are you a maximizer or a satisficer? Drop a comment below and let me know. Overthinking isn't just a psychological habit, it physically and chemically ravages your brain. Think of your brain as a corporate office. The prefrontal cortex, the PFC, is the rational CEO sitting in the penthouse suite, handling logic and long-term planning. The amygdala is the paranoid security guard at the front gate, constantly clutching a megaphone. When you start stressing over a brief late-night text from your boss that reads, "See me tomorrow," the security guard immediately sounds the alarm. Fire! We're getting fired! Once triggered, the amygdala floods the entire office with cortisol and adrenaline. This chemical surge acts like a thick, blinding layer of red firefighting foam. As a result, the CEO up in the penthouse is blinded, choked out, and faints. The executive function officially goes offline. This is the ultimate paradox of overthinking. To resolve anxiety, you desperately need that logical CEO. Yet, the panic from your internal security guard is the exact thing spraying the chemicals that knock the CEO unconscious. It's a flawless, self-sabotaging loop. At this point, you might think, fine, I'll just live 100% rationally, like the CEO, right? Let's look back at Elliot's clinical case. After his surgery, his logic and IQ remained flawless. Yet, he was completely paralyzed by trivial choices, like deciding whether to use a blue or black pen to sign a document. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio discovered that our decisions are actually guided by somatic markers, physiological signals our body sends to the brain, like a gut feeling or a sudden flutter in your stomach. Without an emotional compass, Elliot had to use raw logic to compute everything from scratch. Pure rationality has no natural stopping point. It turns into an infinite division loop. Overthinking is essentially a rebellion of pure logic, when you switch off your body's emotional GPS and try to use your head to calculate the exact trajectory of every speck of dust on the road. So, how do you break the bars and step outside? Especially in today's hyper-connected society. Here are 3 keys rooted in neuroscience. Key 1. Activate the TPN through sensory grounding. When you catch your mind spinning in circles, don't try to fight thoughts with more thoughts. You can't fight fire with fire. Instead, force your brain to shut down the default network, DMN, by activating the task network, TPN, through intense sensory stimulation. Use physical triggers. Take a cold shower, lift heavy weights, go for a run, or simply close your eyes and focus on 5 things you can touch and 4 things you can hear around you. When your senses are overwhelmed by reality, the brain is forced to pull resources away from the anxious DMN to process real-time data. You can't overthink while trying to balance on one leg during a heavy lift. Key 2. Establish a good enough rule for micro-decisions. To escape the maximizer trap, train yourself to be a satisficer by setting hard boundaries. For low-stakes choices, picking food, choosing an outfit, selecting a book, apply the 2-minute rule. Set a countdown timer for exactly 2 minutes, pick the first option that meets your baseline criteria, and never look back. Train your brain to embrace good enough over perfection. Perfectionism is just a polished trap for procrastination, whereas real-world action and experience create true value. Key 3. Create a worry window. Your brain overthinks because it's terrified you'll forget potential dangers. Instead of trying to banish these thoughts, negotiate with them. Set aside a dedicated 15-minute block every day, say from 6 to 6:15 p.m. During this window, give yourself permission to worry completely, legally. Pour all your anxious thoughts onto a notepad. When the 15 minutes are up, close the notebook and move on. If an anxious thought pops up at 9 a.m., jot it down quickly in your phone and tell yourself, that's a valid concern. I'll deal with it at 6 p.m. This technique is clinically proven to retrain your brain to realize that not every stray thought requires an immediate reaction. Your brain isn't your enemy. It's a survival mechanism trying to protect you. But you no longer need to be its prisoner. You hold the key. Next time you're lost in a midnight maze of thoughts, take a deep breath and tell yourself, everything happening in my head is just a simulation of fear. Real life is happening right here, right now. If you found value in this video, share it with someone who is currently trapped in their own head. Breaking free from overthinking is just the first step. But what if the reason you overthink is that you're caught in another exhausting cycle? Pleasing everyone and saying yes when you desperately want to say no. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so we can dive into that in our upcoming episodes. See you there.